Hello and welcome to the inaugural podcast of the JSWOC, the Joint Services Warrant Officers course. We are here at the Defence Academy in Shrivenham. I am Lieutenant Commander Ian Fraser, the Maritime Staff Representative here on the JSWOC, and today, with some help from our invited speakers, we plan to highlight to our listeners the merits and value of the JSWOC for our prospective warrant officers, but also for their commanders, and importantly, the career managers responsible for them. Today we have contributions from our sponsor, Air Commodore Mike Harwood, who will be offering us his strategic perspective of the JSWOC, and our director, Colonel Matthew Whitchurch, telling us what it is and who it is for. And we'll be getting some personal reflections. Can it be recommended? And to bring JSWOC to life, we have a special report encompassing 3 topics covered on the course, just to give you a real flavour of what JSWOC is about. And so, to get the ball rolling, our first guest is the JSWOC's director, Colonel Matthew Whitchurch. Colonel, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Ian.
What is this JSWOC?
Joint Service Warrant Officers course. As the name suggests, it is a course aimed for warrant officers in the British Armed Forces from land, sea and air, and those going into the joint land, sea and air area of work in defence.
And where has this JSWOC come from? What's its background?
It starts off in a review that begins after the operations by the British in Sierra Leone and Kosovo, 1999 and 2000, where it was identified that we are more joined up with land, sea and air forces than ever before, and as we have always done, there are warrant officers at several levels that are now more exposed to land, sea and air matters. Therefore, the implication was that the training so that those warrant officers are able to do more when this increased joint environment, joint being land, sea and air together or a mix of both, have an awareness to understand how everyone works together. Equally, it also gives warrant officers an understanding of what's going on at the higher levels of defence and the higher levels of conflict, or to use the actual terms, the operational and strategic level.
Who is it actually for?
It is for warrant officers who are going to be in jobs or going to jobs where they are having to understand how the other 2 services work or how other parts of British government work, for example, the Home Office, Department for International Development or the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, who will be working in areas such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, NATO, or the European Union, the EU, or the United Nations, the UN. And it's aimed at those warrant officers at the higher level. Equally, it can serve those warrant officers and their equivalents in NATO, or the EU, or indeed in non-NATO armed forces. And, so far, we've also had evidence to show that it would work well for civilians, the 4th part of the Ministry of Defence, both contractors like Serco or indeed civil servants. A 10-day course of high-protein instruction that is very effective because it's only 10 days and several people should do it.
An excellent education package waiting here for the warrant officers to take advantage of. Colonel Matthew Whitchurch, thank you. We're now joined by Air Commodore Mike Harwood, the Assistant Commandant Air here at the College. Air Commodore, good morning and thank you for finding the time to share a more strategic perspective of JSWOC. I'll start by asking this. Warrant officers surely have all the training they need. Is this JSWOC simply a grand gesture, and is it here to stay?
Oh, a grand gesture. It's a conspiracy. That's what everybody always tells me about everything. Maybe this is a conspiracy of ignorance. And if there are people out there who think we should be ignorant, well, then they can stay in a corner as far as I'm concerned and be ignorant. What I'd like to see is a bunch of warrant officers I normally meet who come out and discuss with each other all the issues to do with security, and an opportunity in the Staff College here to really understand warfighting, what it's about, bring their experience to the table and make it better for the next generation.
With an increasingly complex global situation and contemporary security challenges more difficult than ever, there are good command and staff courses at all levels for our officer corps. Why involve the warrant officers?
Yeah, the officer corps do have some very, very good courses running at this particular college. Getting the warrant officer cadre, they are our link to all the soldiers, airmen, sailors who actually do the business, who actually make things happen, who fight the enemy or might be fixing something on behalf of the civil population, might be something to do with foot and mouth. The warrant officers are in the middle of orchestrating all of that. So the more they can understand about the big picture, the more they can understand about what the other services bring, what civilians bring, what other nations can bring, the more likely we are to achieve our aims.
The Army and Navy each provide single service training. So why do we need JSWOC? Is this not duplication?
I'm not aware of any other course which brings together warrant officers from all the services and people from industry, civilians, and get them together for 2 weeks to talk about issues of operational warfighting. I don't know of any other course that does that. So warrant officers will sit side by side with each other, and instead of bickering as we all do, and we complain about what the other services do, we constantly do that. Well, now we'll meet in a convivial atmosphere in this staff college and really talk through all of the issues, and that will increase our fighting power.
In fact, on day one of the course, you actually talk with great passion about fighting power, and you draw on the analogy of how a house is built. Where in this analogy do our warrant officers fit in, and in what way does the insight provided through JSWOC support this?
Let me just say from the outset, I'm not a builder. I couldn't build a house to save my life. There are probably some warrant officers out there who could do just that perfectly. I drew a diagram of a house like a 5-year-old does. A little roof, a cross beam at the top, and some pillars. Pretty easy, and some basic foundations. Now, my idea at the top is the roof, that's fighting power. And what is fighting power? And that's our ability to defeat an enemy, or it's our ability to actually do things, to be successful in whatever we're asked to do by the government, by our senior commanders. Now, there are various components within that ability, one of which is, the physical means. Now, what does that mean? People. What people? Me. I'm a bit of fighting power. Every warrant officer listening to this, every warrant officer out there is a bit of fighting power. And all the warrant officers know that they do, they act, they make things happen. And the more they can understand about the big picture, the more likely they are to be successful. But that's just one bit of it. The other component of fighting power, the intellectual side, the intellect, the ideas behind how we're going to win against a particular enemy. Now, are there warrant officers out there with ideas? Maybe. I want to capture those ideas. I want them to share them with others so that we all learn, because the experiences our people have had over the last few years are extraordinary. And we must not just let that hide in a pub as we discuss it with a few of our mates. We must get that out. And there's the other side, which is a moral component of fighting power, the will to fight. Now, how do we do that? Because we motivate people, we lead people. And again, the warrant officer cadre have more leadership and strength in their little finger than I have in my whole body, because they can inspire people to do things that maybe they don't want to do, maybe when they're scared. And those guys, because they're normally old, craggy and grumpy and get things done, they look you in the eye and they say, we're going to get up there and get the job done. I like those sort of people. I want to rub shoulders with people like that, and therefore they add to the moral component of fighting power. So if you think of my little house there, all the little bits of it, from the intellect side to the physical side to the moral side, and right down to the boring old supporting foundations like we're doing education here. That's a bit of foundation. Now, Al-Qaeda isn't scared by me being educated here, but it is scared by people who are out there doing something on the front line, and that's what the Warrant Officer cadre are about.
So, the house, the fighting power, the foundations, and our warrant officers. A good mix. Air Commodore Mike Harwood, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now let's turn to the students themselves. I am joined by two students who have just graduated from JSWOC. On my left, we have Warrant Officer Ivor Clyde of the Royal Air Force, and on my right, we have Warrant Officer Lynn Doubtfire of the Royal Logistics Corps. Mr. Clyde, Miss Doubtfire, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we ask you both about JSWOC, perhaps you can tell us each something about the part of the service you represent.
I'm currently holding the post as yeoman on the Bowman Training and Advisory Group Joint, which is based at RF Hendel, but we spend most of our time on the road. Basically, the role is to introduce Bowman into the armed forces.
I'm an Army Movement Controller based in Edinburgh for Headquarters 2div, providing technical advice for any movements of units within the north of England and Scotland.
The big question then, What has been your experience of JSWOC?
That's quite an interesting question. It's confirmed that I've already got a basic knowledge of joint working, and it's what it's done is it's confirmed that there is a place for joint working in the service today. Basically, it's opened up my background and allowed me to build on the wealth of experience that comes with the other warrant officers.
Yeah, it's been a real eye-opener for myself because I just concentrate on army business, army day-to-day running of things, and so to actually just speak to other warrant officers from other services has been an eye-opener, as well as the lectures and the debates that we've had.
Okay, and what about the highlights?
Highlights for me have been listening to people like Admiral Parry who look into the future and what's happening in the world and how it's going to affect us, and that was a real eye-opener for me, and quite scary as well.
Basically, been the interesting areas of debate that we've had throughout the course, ranging from matters dealing with United Nations to NATO, the actual working with and discussing with people who you wouldn't normally have contact with, people, academics that are experts in their own particular fields.
I've heard this exercise Rumkey generates some heated discussions and debate. Mr. Clyde, you've been involved in this. What do you have to say to that allegation?
No, not at all. It was a very well organised, well-run debate with a good structure to it, with a very valuable outcome.
I take it from that then, Rumkey may be heated, lots of challenge there. What about the rest of the course? Is it stimulating? Is there much interest in the rest of the course?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of the lectures we've had have raised, really quite, quite big questions. There's a lot of experience sat in the room, and they all want to put their point across. So there's been an awful lot of questions come out of, quite, what you think was just like a small subject. There's been a lot of questions generated out of it.
And finally, the litmus test. Would you each recommend JSWOC to your fellow warrant officers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from my experience, it's totally opened my eyes to an awful lot of things. And I think even if you're not going to work in a joint service environment, I think you still need to come on and be exposed to what everybody else does. So definitely.
Absolutely. I found it very valuable. Give me a better understanding and insight into the tri-service world. I would very much recommend it to anyone who is wanting to, perhaps who's going to be employed in a joint type of role. Give me an insight into interesting areas in itself, United Nations, NATO, as I say, and I would recommend it.
So, straight from the horse's mouth, folks. Thank you, warrant officers, Ivor Clyde and Lynn Doubtfire. We're now joined by JSWOC's course warrant officer, Mr. Lindsay Morgan. Mr. Morgan, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
What facilities exist for the students here at the JSCSC?
Well, I would suggest everything. The whole building that we work within is purpose-built, and that means exactly what it says. It's an educational establishment, but also a mess. And the support facilities that are provided here by Serco under the PFI are second to none. Whatever we need, we can get. It has a price, but it's worth paying.
Tell us some more then of the JSWOC programme itself and the level it's pitched at.
There's no dumbing down on this programme. This is the same. We get the same speakers from Defence Studies Department, King's College lecturers, that the HCSC do, the Higher Command and Staff course, and the Advanced Command and Staff course. And in fact, that level is exactly what the course is pitched at. We have the same input, the same content, the same subject matter, and the same debates if we listen to the lecturers afterwards, and they enjoy immensely the Warrant Officers' company.
And the actual speakers themselves, where do they come from?
The speakers come from all over the place, and we target at SO2 and SO1 level or higher. We have them coming from the Development Concept and Doctrine Centre, PGHQ, Joint Helicopter Command, but we also bring them in from the local, through the Advanced Command and Staff course, to not just look at capability and what we've got, but how we use it, and also some of the restraints that we're under when we're going on operations through international humanitarian law, ethics, laws of armed conflict, and perhaps some of the higher brow things that we don't consider in our usual day-to-day business.
And yourself as a warrant officer, is it difficult for you then to be the course warrant officer amongst your peers, 30 other warrant officers?
Now, I think if you ask most warrant officers, they realise that perhaps at first that might be a little daunting. And yes, you have to be, reasonably strong to put up with some of the banter you get. But essentially, all warrant officers know what the other warrant officers do and what they need. So they help me as much as I help them.
And finally, Mr. Morgan, then, where can our listeners get some more information?
Well, they can just ring me if they like, 96161 8745. Or if you're ringing from an outside line, then it's 01793 788745. Or you can go to the DIN 06-072. Or you can email me, lmorgan.jscsc@da.mod.uk.
So with your peers, a fine balance to be struck then. Mr. Morgan, our friendly course officer, thank you. And now we have a special report to bring JSWOC to life. 3 topics to give you a real flavour of what the course is all about. To begin with, we have Squadron Leader Dave Lewis, who had this to say when I asked him how air power is adjusting to the new security challenges we now face.
Well, the age-old characteristics and strengths of air power that first came to the military fore during the First World War remain just as important today. For example, reach, speed and height. But given the ever-changing nature of the threats that we face, it is important that the way air power is employed also changes to ensure that it can meet new challenges. This has been the case in the decades since the First World War and is no different today. The focus is now very much on expeditionary operations, and nations around the world are introducing new systems and processes to conduct these operations. For example, the Royal Air Force is introducing the concept of expeditionary air wings, which will enable it to train and deploy as cohesive units of air power which are better prepared and capable of transitioning quickly from peacetime structures and deploying swiftly on operations. As part of the transformation, the RAF is also making significant investment in equipment. For example, the further development of Joint Force Harrier and the gradual transition of the Air Defence Force from Tornado F3 to Typhoon. Key enablers are also being reorganised for expeditionary operations through the formation of Air Combat Service Support Units. With such changes, the Royal Air Force will be able to meet the future challenges for air power.
And that was Squadron Leader Dave Lewis talking about the future of air power. Now let's turn to the students themselves again. Joining us, we have Warrant Officer Mick McGing of the Royal Navy and Warrant Officer Dave Kent of the Royal Air Force. Mr. McGing, Mr. Kent, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Before we ask you both about JSWOC, perhaps you can tell us something about the part of the service you each represent.
From a Royal Navy backpoint, I'm a marine engineer by trade and have occupied most positions through destruction until promotion to Warrant Officer 1 and then taken up various engineering staff posts, culminating in a non-specific post as the Executive Warrant Officer on HMS Campbelltown.
I'm from an RAF intelligence background. Up until the early 90s, I served predominantly in Berlin as part of the sort of Cold War team. When the Iron Curtain came down, I came back to the UK, and since then I've been serving in a joint service environment, and up to the current day I serve on a joint service team in charge of a watch of intelligence keepers.
So Mr. McGing, what has been your experience of JSWOC?
It's been an eye-opener to bring out the various elements that collectively we should be exposed to, and I suppose it's almost a bit late in my career to be exposed to this amount of multi-agency environment. However, it does have real benefits, though, in understanding what people do.
And it has been useful?
Very useful indeed. It's just put the polish on in the final jigsaw piece in the puzzle, so I've got a bigger picture now, which is a lot better.
Mr. Kent, JSWOC been useful? Good experience?
Certainly a good experience. Useful from a day-to-day perspective, I'm not too sure. Useful from a wider educational perspective and the knowledge of how the decision-making process is going on above my head, extremely useful.
And what about the highlights then?
The highlights for me specifically, I can recall two particular presentations that I found both entertaining and more than useful. Useful from a sort of a combined and multi-agency perspective, and one was the NATO presentation when the German guy and the other nationalities came up, stood in front of us and basically gave us an honest appraisal of the sort of UK strengths and weaknesses working in the joint and combined environment. And another one was certainly the sort of fireside presentation by Admiral Parry, looking into the future and what he thought the defence problems that we needed to face in the future would be.
And you're referring there to the very important multinational sort of component of the syllabus, where our sort of friends from France, Germany and Canada actually sort of gave that excellent brief. I heard exercise Rum Key generate some heated discussions and debate.
I think that was probably because we were all bringing various offerings to the table, and it's understanding who's bringing what particular offering to that table. And I think that's the whole point of the joint approach, is that we do all bring something to the table. It's understanding what the individuals bring and their experience with them. If you haven't been in a joint environment, it's quite an enlightening experience to see what people know and how much information we've actually gathered over the past 2 weeks.
And that heated debate then, is it healthy?
Yes, I think it is a healthy debate because it actually allows everyone to voice their opinions and nobody is left behind. So it's truly a joint enterprise then.
So leaving Rum Key aside, can I take it the rest of the course is rather dull and subdued?
Dull and subdued, certainly not. Virtually all the presentations were of interest to most of the people. Obviously some didn't hit the mark, but in general terms, the longer the course went on and the more people got to know each other and interacted, there was a really good camaraderie going along sort of into the second week.
And finally, the litmus test then. Would you each recommend JSWOC to your fellow warrant officers?
Yes, I would, and I'd also ask senior officers to seriously look at appointing Warrant Officer 1s to joint service posts using our experience.
Most definitely, yes. Could I recommend it and say to one of my peers, this is going to help you do your job better in a fortnight's time? I don't think so. However, from a broader educational aspect and a wider awareness of what's going on in the world and the challenges defence are meeting, most definitely yes.
Again, some insider insight. Gentlemen, thank you. Warrant Officers Mick McGinn and Dave Kent. As SO2 Maritime, I also have responsibility for JSWOC's marketing. JSWOC appears to be a top package, but what are we doing about it to ensure that you, the warrant officer, become aware of it and actually ultimately come on JSWOC? Firstly, with JSWOC operating under capacity, improving awareness and better understanding of JSWOC by both the single service desks and the target warrant officer community was recognised as the priority. A more dynamic marketing strategy, thus, was initiated back in December 2005. It was recognised that the single service or the respective single service secretaries would have to be engaged, and as such, visits with each of the Army, Navy and Air Force career managers actually took place in the early part of this year. Hopefully this successfully raised the profile of JSWOC, promoting that better understanding for the commanders of these warrant officers. Another tack has been the promotional activity with what we would call the friendly media. Here I'm talking about Soldier magazine and Focus magazine. Both of these magazines have been the first of the single service house magazines to visit JSWOC, and they've actually now published promotional articles. Similarly, Navy News and RAF News have been approached, and likewise they are proposing to visit JSWOC and do similar. Additionally, students from each service have been requested to write articles of their own experience on JSWOC, i.e. from the horse's mouth. Hopefully, fruits of this labour are now starting to bear fruit. Finally, the JSWOC website has been re-energised, reconstructed with a fresh perspective, so that you, prospective warrant officer, can go straight to our website and actually see what JSWOC may really be like. In fact, the fact you're listening to this podcast suggests you've got there already. That's it from me for marketing. Now moving on to a new theme. We're joined again by the course director, Colonel Matthew Whitchurch. In a nutshell, Why should prospective students consider the Joint Services Warrant Officers course?
The students are warrant officers. Warrant officers run the armed forces. Ultimately, in the end, we are practitioners. Warrant officers take the people and do the business. What's changed in the last couple of years is we've got smaller, we've become more together in expeditionary operations going all over the place, and warrant officers being closer and are working at a higher level are required and need to have an educated eyeball in what's going on at the higher levels and those working at the higher levels. If you take the warrant officer experience, take the warrant officer maturity, add on this 10-day course, what you are giving is a serious improvement in the whole capability of defence, because we've got high-priced proven operators with extra knowledge adding real value to defence in both staff and command. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? The point I would say to anyone listening to this is get onto our website, look up the email and contact details of any of our warrant officers listed, and get an independent opinion from them, warts and all.
You suggest they get their bids in for JSWOC?
I suggest that they get onto their career managers and tell them that they would like to do it for their own professional development education. If nothing else, because we are very small, we haven't got many warrant officers, and we need every single chap. And if you want to improve your understanding of the wider context of defence and this very dangerous and difficult world we're in, and where we fit in and what we can do to add value to the world, then come and do this 10-day gentlemen's and ladies' course at Watchfield.
Sounds compelling. Once again, Colonel, thank you. To finish with, where the truth is really at. Our final student perspectives. On my left, we have Warrant Officer Tiny Hunt of the Royal Artillery, and on my right, we have Warrant Officer Steve Rule of the Royal Navy. Mr. Hunt, Mr. Rule, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Before we ask you both about JSWOC, again, tell us something about the part of the service you each represent.
Yes, I'm obviously in the Army as a Sergeant Major, representing the Royal Artillery, and I'm currently based at the Joint Force Headquarters, which is the deployable side of PGHQ. So I really am in a true joint environment, working with, obviously, the other services.
I'm Royal Navy, and I represent DCME, which is Defence College of Electrical and Mechanical Engineering, which encompasses HMS Sultan Navy, St Athens RAF, and Borden and Arborfield, which are Army, as the Executive Warrant Officer.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hunt, what has been your experience on JSWOC?
I think overall it's been a very good and useful experience. Not only the opportunity to meet guys from the other services and to compare notes, really, but just the opportunity to work and look at things at the higher level. We all come from a tactical background, but this is looking at the operational and even strategic level bits and pieces. And it's good to have an understanding of the tactics, the doctrine, and the way things are done at the levels that we don't normally get the opportunity to have a look at.
And so it has been useful?
Extremely.
And Mr. Rule, your experience of JSWOC?
Yeah, I concur what my friend says on the left. I've now got a greater understanding of the multinational operations and how it all meshes together from the higher levels all the way filtered all the way down through. The experience here, it's been great with the other two services. Certain aspects we've looked at, particularly the presentation of the other two services, enlightened me greatly about their ethos and the subtle culture differences between the three services. Now I've got a great understanding of them.
And what about the highlights for you then?
Biggest highlights is some of the presentations. Rear Admiral Parry's fireside chat was extremely enlightening, talking about the future and what we could expect in 30 years' time. I think most of us were riveted to what he was saying. Some of the lectures as well, the SF ones, and as I've already alluded to, the two presentations from the other two services, and some of the presentations on air ops and the Navy ops as well. And I think the Colonel brings it all really well together when he's summing up his the presentations and lectures they're given.
I've heard Exercise Rum Key generates some heated discussion and debate.
Yeah, that's very true. For me personally, I've had a little bit of experience and exposure to the operational estimate, and I personally felt that maybe the scenario selected, which was a NEO, perhaps didn't fit the operational estimate purely as a good example for running that operational estimate. There are other ways of doing it. There are other estimates and vehicles and tools that could be used. But that's probably the thing to remember, is it is just a decision-making tool to allow you to analyse what the problem is and to then work it through and come out with a solution. So in that respect, I did enjoy Rum Key. We learnt a lot, and it was a useful exercise.
And can I take it, if Rum Key is perhaps heated with some debate, the rest of the course a little bit dull, perhaps subdued?
Absolutely not. Everything we've done on the course has had discussion attached to it, whether that's been in the classroom, in the lecture room, or in quiet times we've had a social drink together. It's been far from quiet the whole 2 weeks. It's been the time has actually flown by, and that's a good indicator of how much you've enjoyed the course.
Finally, the litmus test, gentlemen. Would you each recommend JSWOC to your fellow warrant officers?
Without a doubt. This really is a prerequisite for anybody who's going to be working in the joint environment. This is the only course really which is out there at the moment which prepares you in any shape or form to go and be a credible force, if you like, in any of the joint environments. I'd also say it would be of value, great value even, to some single service warrant officers selected, but certainly of use. Certainly it's got to be a prerequisite for those working in the joint environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd definitely recommend this to anybody who's going to work in a joint environment. And also, certain selected warrant officers should do this course as well. The exposure you get to the other two services and understanding their roles and how they all fit together, I think is mandatory.
Again, some more straight talking from our students, graduating today from JSWOC. Gentlemen, thank you. Warrant Officers Tiny Hunt and Steve Rule. That's all we have time for. JSWOC then, an ideal 10-day education package looking at the wider defence context at the higher level. Is JSWOC for you? So until our next podcast instalment, from me, Lieutenant Commander Ian Fraser, on behalf of the staff and students of the JSWOC, thank you and goodbye.